Welcome to another Countryside Adventures video. Today we're going to be doing some suspension maintenance and upgrades to our Jayco Jay Flight 174BH, or as Colin and I like to refer to it as, Outpost 174. As you can tell, we've got a ton of parts laid out here on our work table. So we'll dive off into what we have here and the reasons behind it, and then we'll get started on this project. So full transparency, I did an absolute ton of research on the internet, and I personally could not find anything regarding any sort of project like this on an RV camper trailer. So I thought as I go through with this, I should probably share it with someone out there, because maybe you have a project that you would like to do something similar with on an RV camper, or maybe just some sort of trailer in general. So here's what I got as a 5,000 foot overview and some of the thought processes behind it. But before I do that, I want to say right up front, obviously make sure that you check your owner's manual or any service manuals for your particular application. Don't just take some random dude out on the internet's word for it. I just want to share kind of what I've got going on with this project. It should be fairly straightforward, but just make sure that you're going about this in a safe manner, and it's going to be something that's not going to leave you stranded on the side of the road, or in a worst case scenario, something extremely tore up or someone hurt. So with that, the Jayco Jay Flight little single axle trailers have a absolute terrible reputation on the internet for spring failures for whatever weird reason. And up front, this is all internet hearsay. I just know that you never hear about the good stories. You always hear about the bad stories, and there's plenty of bad stories about spring failures on these little single axle campers. So with that, what we're going to do is we're going to upgrade from the factory 1,750 pound springs, which is a 4-leaf, to a Dorman 2,000 pound 4-leaf. That will obviously give us new bushings in the eyelets of our springs. We're also going to go ahead and install a new set of U-bolts and plates while we're at it. That is an absolute essential for installing a set of leaf springs. We're also going to install a set of wet WT wet bolts so that we can grease and service our eyelets and our bushings on the camper. And then last but not least, Outpost 174 came equipped with some 205 75 14-inch wheels and tires, and it's just a very basic steel wheel, and it did come factory with some Goodyear Endurance 14-inch tires. So I thought while we're doing this project, I did a ton of research, and I went ahead and picked up a set of 6-inch wide aluminum wheels. So we have a set of these in a 15 by 6-inch size, and we also have a fresh set of Goodyear Endurance 15-inch tires. Now, obviously, much of the thought process behind this project was just general maintenance, but some of this was also just because of that bad reputation. I want to go ahead and upgrade the springs, so we're going to go from the factory rated 1,750 pound springs to a Dorman brand 2,000 pound rated spring, and that upgrade should eliminate just a little bit of that droop. Probably not much, probably won't be enough to really make a huge difference, and those 15-inch wheels and tires should give us just a slight increase of overall diameter. Now, some of the thought process behind this was giving just a little bit of lift to Outpost 174. Nothing crazy monster truck over the top, no off-road suspension stuff. But on Colin and I going out on our hunting trips, we do go down a lot of just dirt, basically cattle roads. And so an added little bit of ground clearance obviously will not hurt. So that was my thought, was to give us just a little bit of ground clearance. So that is kind of the 5,000 foot overview of what I've got here, the thought process, and the parts that I've got laid out that I've chosen and the reasons why. So with that, I've gone ahead and got some measurements before we get started underneath Outpost 174, so we can kind of do a quick before and after. And these measurements I just grabbed really basic with the tape measure. It's nothing specific, nothing going to be over the top accurate, but it is just basically a general idea. So if I do something like this project, you'll kind of have a general idea of the what, the why, and the where you're going. Let's go ahead and get this project going, because, well, for one, I am curious aesthetically how this is going to look, and two, if we're really going to have any sort of height increase or a little bit of ground clearance increase. So the only thing left to do with this project is everything.
Okay, so let's get our measurements on the campsite, or what is going to be the passenger side of Outpost 174, and you can see that we got our tape measure posted up there, and we should be just about in line with the hub there. I'm going to call this 28 3/8. So that's going to be our measurement to the bottom of this fender well right here. 28 3/8 is what we're going to go with. Now, as we're measuring this, remember that we're going to be changing 3 things. So we're going to be changing the tires, the wheels. We're also going to be installing new wet bolts, and we'll have new bushings in our leaf springs, and we're going to be upgrading from 1,750 pound springs to 2,000 pound springs from Dorman. So we're going to have multiple changes here. Now, to the top of our tire here, you can see that we're somewhere in the ballpark of about 24 3/4. We'll call it 24 3/4. You can see if we change that angle just slightly, it changes. So let's just call it 24 3/4. Again, we're doing this with a tape, so I don't know how super accurate this is going to be. But for anyone out there that's going to be doing some upgrades on your RV, this ought to give you a pretty fair idea as to where you stand. Right now, from the top of the tire, we've got about 3 7/8 or so, somewhere right along in there. I'm just going to call it 3 7/8. So that's kind of where we stand from the top of the tire up to the bottom of the fender well lip. Now from the tread to the back of the fender well here on Outpost 174, it looks like we got about 1.5 inches. So it looks like this is probably going to be our closest point, is 1.5 inches. And from the tire tread up to the front side of the fender well on Outpost 174, we're about 3 inches. So we got quite a bit of clearance there. And from the ground to the frame, we're about 16 3/8 or so. So you can see we're posted up down there. And there is our tape to the bottom of the frame. Now I'm just inside of the frame, and I'm hoping you can see that fairly clearly. I'm trying to do this one-handed underneath the camper, but we are going to be about 10 3/4 from the ground up to the bottom of the axle. All right, so we've gone ahead and just jacked it up by the axle with our floor jack. We just put a pad on it just to kind of be safe. We got our jack stands under the front and rear, just keep things safe. And so right now we're just going to go ahead and remove the tire and wheel. So here's what we've ended up with. So Colin went ahead and cleaned all this up for us. He's got it painted so that it's just blacked out behind the aluminum wheels. So on the spring hangers and the springs for the eye bolts, the nuts are going to be 11/16, and the actual bolt heads are going to be a 13/16. Again, don't go with like anything specific from this video because there seems to be nothing that is consistent about the RV world as far as I can learn. So just kind of want to let you know where that's at. Colin has the plates and the U-bolts out, painted them because they just came in raw metal. So we just shot a real simple coat of paint on them just to keep them from rusting. The springs are obviously already painted, so we're not worried about that. So that's just a quick basic update as to where we're at. So as our paint's drying here, our U-bolts and our plates are drying, we're going to go ahead and start getting the bolts loose on the leaf springs and see what we can do to kind of get this situated so we can start going back together with everything. So I've already taken the tires and the wheels while he was working on that. I put valve stems in the wheels, so we'll be ready to mount the tires up here in just a second. So we're kind of both working on separate projects at the same time, so there's stuff going on in the background. But that's the basic overview as to where we're at. So we're going to keep rolling. Spring and 2 of those bolts that's in the white box. So rule of thumb with the eyelet bolts on your leaf springs, don't tighten them all the way down until the suspension is loaded. So we'll go ahead and we'll do a final torque on everything once it's loaded. So we're basically just going to start the bolts and nuts at this point. And our new nuts are a different size. Well, doggone. All right, so the nuts on our new bolts are going to be a 3/4. So I am just going to get them started. I'm not going to bottom it out. We want to make sure we torque them in with the suspension loaded. And that should be good for that. Okay, so quick update on this. Here's where we're at. While paint was dry, Colin and I went ahead, got our tires and wheels mounted. They're ready to go on. Paint's dry. Now, I did go ahead and put the eyelet bolts, the wet bolts, in the same orientation that we took them off. And the reason being is the heads of the bolts do have knurls on them, which is basically just lines cut into them to kind of bite themselves into the metal. So I kept them in that same orientation. Really the only downside is you just got to take the tire and wheel off to grease this bolt, which you could probably just do anytime you're doing tire and wheel maintenance. So that is not the end of the world. Just want to let you know that. I did wipe a little bit of grease on the shafts of the bolts as I was going with this. That is one thing that I did not show earlier. I wanted you to know. So I did have to kind of shift the axle back and forth a little bit to get it to fall into place, and it's basically just, you'll see what I'm talking about as you're doing yours. It's just a plate on the bottom of this axle, and it has a hole in it, and then it basically goes into the bolt that holds the leaf springs together. Very simple, just shift it back and forth, takes a little bit of effort, fell right in. Interesting bit about the U-bolts. For whatever reason, it's just a China set of U-bolts, but it came with knurled nuts and lock washers. So go figure with that one. I have no clue why. Maybe they just figured they already had the stock or whatever the reason was. But we got knurled nuts and lock washers. So we'll just use both. We'll keep it simple. I've already gone ahead and hung the U-bolts on there. So one of the things that Colin did do is he got everything wiped down with just some wax and grease remover and just a simple coat of black spray paint on the U-bolts and the plates just so they don't corrode up. Other than that, it's pretty straightforward. So I'm going to keep going with this. It's going fairly smooth, you know, as smooth as can be expected. Anyway, you can see that we got the same dust cap back on it. We didn't have to go with the bearing buddies or anything like that. It's got grease zerks in it. The grease looked fine. So we put a couple of shots of grease in it, checked everything out. Everything sounds fine. So we're going to go ahead and get this bolted back up, and then we can torque everything once the suspension is loaded up, and we can kind of go from there with it. So that's where we're at. All right, so the U-bolt nuts are a 3/4, so I'm going to go ahead and just get those snug. And so again, just going to bottom it out basically, and then once the suspension's loaded, we'll go ahead and torque everything in. From what I can find online, from any manuals, Dexter axles, Jayco, etc., this is extremely straightforward. Basically, every torque spec that I found falls within about 50 foot-pounds. So I'm just going to torque the eyelet nuts to 50 foot-pounds, the U-bolt nuts up to 50 foot-pounds. So that's basically what we're going to go with. We're going to go with the 50 pounds universal. If you're going to do this on your own, make sure that you stop, 10 miles in, 50 miles in, 25 miles in. Make you some stages. Pull over, stop, check everything, double check it, make sure that you're good to go with this. Again, just be extra safe. Other than that, I'm going to go ahead and get this thing buttoned up, and we'll see where we stand with it and see if we can go ahead and get the tires and wheels on and see if this is going to work. I really don't have a clue if this is going to yet or not. So we'll get that on, get the suspension loaded, see if we can torque everything in. Now, when you tighten up your U-bolts, make sure that you tighten them up in a crisscross pattern, sort of like you would lug nuts on a wheel. Just want to make sure I said that. I don't think I said that earlier. So crisscross pattern on the U-bolts. All right, so to make sure that we torque all of our bolts in correctly, we're going to fully load our spring. Now that everything is lined up, I'm going to make sure we are off of our jack stands, and I'm going to go back to our jack stands just enough to make sure that I'm not depending on my jack if something happens. So I feel pretty safe with that. Both jack stands have weight, just a little bit of weight on them, but the axle is fully compressed on the spring. Got my torque wrench set to 50 foot-pounds, so I'm going to go ahead and get these set in. Grease up. All right, so after our tires, wheels, springs, the whole combination, we're coming in at about 29 and 15/16. So we're just under 30 inches. And so that is going to be from the ground up to the top line of the fender well. And then if we go from tire tread out to the fender, let's call it 2 15/16 to the front of the fender, and then we'll go to the back. And so on the back, we're about 2 inches. So we got good clearance there, and then I'll slide under and I'll get us our axle measurement. All right, from the ground to the rear of the frame rail, we are at 18 inches. So that's our measurement there. We might be just barely under 18. It actually kind of depends on where you slide tape measure, but let's just call it 18 inches. And then from the ground up to the bottom of the axle, we are dead on 11.5 inches. So that is our measurements. All right, we have got Outpost 174 at our first stop, and we are at Buc-ee's in Terrell. And so we're gonna check and see what we got going on. So there is our leaf springs, our bolts, everything looks good. Looks like our U-bolt nuts, everything looks good. I'm gonna slide under there, put hands on them here in just a second. I'm gonna check the hubs. Absolutely no temperature in the hubs, so everything is still cool there. Let's run over to the passenger side. Heading over to the passenger side, you can see that we've got our gear on there. Sorry about my big shadow in the way there. And we've got our leaf spring bolt. Still plenty of threads hanging out there. Under there. Our nuts are still in place. Again, I'll put my hands on it as soon as I set this camera down. No temperature in the hubs. See our fittings there. I think everything looks good. Okay, I am going to get underneath this thing and put my hands on it. You can see we're all set up there. So as I put my hands on everything, again, just checked all the bolts, nuts, U-bolts, all that stuff. I did check the tires, and you can feel just a little bit of temperature in the treads of the Goodyear Endurance. Nothing that is a big deal in any way. Just want to share that with you, that there is a little bit of temperature when you put your hand on the tire. It's about 48 degrees, 47, something like that out here, but nothing over the top. There is a little bit of temperature in those Goodyears. So we're back on the road. Say goodbye to Buc-ee's. Next stop, Bass Pro Shops in Garland, Texas. And we finally got a little bit of temperature in the hubs. Check the lug nuts. Everything's tight. Everything's good there. Got a little temperature in the tires. Actually, a little bit more than what we had at Buc-ee's, but also the ambient temperature outside starting to warm up. Check the nuts on the leaf springs. Everything looks good. Everything looks good on the U-bolts. Looks like everything is in order. I'm going to run around to the other side, give it a quick check. Other than that, we're going to wrap up in Bass Pro Shops and get back on the road. So if you've seen any of our RV videos, this is kind of the stuff we prepare for. And so with that, you know, there's got to be a market for stuff like this, I would think, because we don't need one of those crazy, like the Opus brand campers or the RVs that looks like you could drop it off of a mountain and it would survive. But I like the idea of, say, the one, I think it's the 199 MBH from Jayco, something like that. Because to me, that's just enough off-road for things like this. But our little Outpost 174 is doing a great job. All right, we are now over 100 miles. Actually, we just hit 103.7 miles on our upgrades for the Jayco Jay Flight 174BH, or as we like to call it, Outpost 174. And so just gonna give you my quick thoughts real quick to the upgrades. So overall, I have to say, over the 14-inch tires and the old springs, and I'm sure some of this just comes with age and wear and weight sitting on those springs, but I have to say that the ride quality is vastly improved. And like, I can't really express how improved it really is. The sway is still there a little bit, which is to be expected out of something that's a single axle and as tall as 174BH is. But the sway is vastly improved as well. So there is still a little bit of it there, which is to be expected, but it is so much better than what it was. But I have to say that the real improvement is the ride quality. With the prior setup, there was just a lot of, for lack of a better term, just a lot of bounce in the suspension. And it was very much just, I mean, it was constant. It was like a basketball basically being towed behind the F-150. But with this new setup, like literally I can't express how much better the ride is. It's kind of staggering that manufacturers don't just do this from the beginning instead of trying to save every penny possible. I get it, it's a business, they're in business to make a profit, but just how improved it is really staggering. So
basically it tracks better. The ride is vastly improved. Everything's worked out. The nuts are all still tight on the U-bolts. The lug nuts are good. The aluminum wheels are absolutely doing fantastic. The hubs are staying, you know, at a relatively good temperature. The temperature was up just slightly on the tire treads. You know, you could touch it and just tell that it was slightly warm, like you would a normal tire on a car or anything else. So nothing crazy there. Again, we did balance the tires and wheels to a dead zero. I know it's on a trailer, but my personal recommendation is just go ahead and balance the wheels and tires no matter what. It is going to help extend the life of the trailer and just kind of keep from beating things up back there as you go down the road. I mean, the reality of it is it's basically a small house going down the road, so anything that you can do to help with that. And balancing tires is relatively effortless and inexpensive, so why not just go ahead and do it? So with that, would I do this project again? Absolutely, without a doubt, 1000% I would do it. If you're on the fence about something like this, just bite the bullet and go ahead and do it. I mean, seriously, the improvement is really phenomenal. I'm super happy with the money that I spent and the effort that Colin and I put into this upgrade. I'm very happy that we didn't run out and trade our camper in and go spend $35,000 on a new camper, because this right here absolutely made it worth it for basically what is a couple of few $100 at the most. So with that, I really do recommend this upgrade if at all possible. If you can do it, this is something that you can do in your driveway, absolutely no problem. Just take your time. You know, pay attention to what you're doing. This is something that could be knocked out in a weekend with no issues, especially if you got like you and a buddy, or you know, you and your spouse, whatever it is. Definitely something that can be done. So again, get off the fence and go ahead and do it. And if you're considering something like this, with that, we appreciate you watching. I really do hope you got some good information out of this video. And as always, we'll see you outdoors.